Can you beat Devil May Cry 5 without attacking or shooting? Now, when I say this, I don't mean it in a pacifist run style challenge. I probably don't need to explain to you why that's not possible in a game like this, but rather, is it humanly possible to beat all of the enemies and bosses of Devil May Cry 5 when we strip all the main characters of their main tools of dealing damage? Technically no, because of this one little spot. Pretend you didn't see anything, guys. Not only that, but is it possible to do it in Dante Must Die mode, the hardest difficulty of the game, where enemies have both a ton of health and deal a ton of damage? Join me as we take a look at what is left of our main cast once we remove their main offensive options, and if it's possible to use the rest of their tools to beat the game. Starting off with Nero, you probably already guessed that our main source of damage is his Devil Breaker, specifically Overture, and in some cases Rawhide for slightly less damage but more overall crowd control. Other than that, most of his other breakers either don't do damage, can be used without attack or shoot buttons, or are just situational for a main damage source. We do still have a use here and there for Buster and Helter Skelter, but for the most part we just use Overture. Additionally, we also have access to Nero's Devil Bringer, which can not only grab enemies for massive single target damage, but also allow us to do some extra tiny damage in between animations. Overall, as you can see in the background, Nero isn't all that bad, and beating both Goliath and Artemis wasn't the worst thing ever. A bit boring, but overall not too bad. With the main hiccups being riots. Oh my god, riots, the bane of my existence. These lizards are so freaking aggressive, and with Dante Must Die mode making them tankier and giving them massive boosts in damage, plus the new enemy placement in the difficulty makes any encounter with riots a total nightmare. But other than that, it wasn't too bad. Now, I would love to show you the full fights and especially the bosses, but I'm going to be honest, most of the fights took a very long time and were mostly me spamming the same moves over and over. But if you're really interested in watching the full fights, I have everything vlogged in the channel, you can check it out over here. That being said, I still decided to do a small tiny little edit for Goliath and Artemis. Hope you enjoy. What does in a place like this mean? Earth? Or just this specific place? By the looks of it, you seem to really be hating the architecture of this spot, so... After Nero, we get introduced to V. And oh my god. Coming into this challenge, I already expected V to be the hardest, but man, I did not expect it to be so hard that we literally have an entire 7-hour stream just for one V mission. This is where I really need to get into explaining the difficulty of this challenge. When you strip V out of his attack and shoot buttons, you get rid of Griffin and Shadow as a way to deal damage. And yes, this does include the buff to make them attack automatically, as this also requires the attack and shoot button inputs to activate. So without Shadow and Griffin, all that is left is either Nightmare or V's Cane. So either an ultimate that is tied to a temporary energy system, not to mention Nightmare's tanky AI at times, or a move that is supposed to be used only as an execution that normally does nearly no damage. And the final nail in the coffin being that unlike the rest of the characters, V's Devil Trigger doesn't actually heal him. So in a boss fight, the health we get is all that we get. Yeah. V was such a pain, and the main reason why it took us about 20 hours to beat this challenge. So please, if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and if you haven't, leave a comment. It really makes me feel like all this effort was worth it in the end. So the first thing we need to figure out is, what would the most consistent way for us to gain Devil Trigger be? Now, most of you probably think the book, but in reality, using the book when all the enemies only have you as a target is basically impossible, unless you find some cheap spot to stand in where enemies can't get you. As far as I'm aware, you cannot abuse the AI system where enemies don't attack you if they're out of your view, since the Devil Trigger gain seems to actually be based on the number of enemies on your screen while you're reading the book, so that doesn't work either. So with the book out of the question, our next option would be taunting. But taunting actually seems to have some sort of cooldown when it comes to giving you Devil Trigger, so that doesn't work either. What about dodging? For those who don't know, if you perfect dodge an attack, you gain a little bit of DT. That being said, especially when there's a lot of enemies and they move around, it's very inconsistent and can often result in some weird camera stuff, resulting in us getting hit, which with V is not a risk worth taking. So what does that leave us with? Well, believe it or not, there's actually another way of gaining DT. Enemy Step. Yes, Enemy Step in the game actually gives you a bit of DT, and unlike the rest of our options, it's both easy to use even when enemies are aggro to you, as you're usually avoiding the attack while you're doing it, plus it doesn't seem to have any sort of cooldown for giving us Devil Trigger. So, this is why you'll often see in the background my skinny ass jumping around like a monkey on top of enemies. Another thing is that we have to figure out the best way to actually use our Devil Trigger. Now, there's two ways of controlling Nightmare. You can either summon him and just let him do his own thing, or you can ride him and actually control which moves he does. Now, even though riding him does give us more consistent damage, unfortunately when enemies attack us while we're riding Nightmare, they actually take away from our Devil Trigger. Since enemies deal a ton of damage in Dante Must Die mode, this usually means that our DT ends immediately. So unless we really need to be specific with what Nightmare attacks, we want to leave him to do his own thing. Additionally, since at the same time enemies will most likely be focused on Nightmare, we can even add a little bit more damage by helping him out by attacking with our cane. Normally the cane doesn't do a lot of damage and staggers us, but if you use the taunt given to you by beating the Blade Palace with V, you can actually buff the weapon to not only deal double damage, but also remove the stagger animation that you would normally get. And although it's still extremely slow, it's pretty decent for an increase of our damage output. Finally, there's one other way that you can actually use Nightmare, and that is just as a big gunshot, basically. You can summon Nightmare, wait for him to do his thing while he spawns, usually that's the most amount of damage that he can do in one attack, and then just unsummon him. Now, although this is probably the most damage you can get out of your Devil Trigger, it's still very inconsistent, it's very slow, and leaves you much more open for getting attacked in between Nightmare despawning and you being able to summon him again. So we use this very rarely. But it's still pretty good against certain bosses. And finally, with all that out of the way, here is me after 5 hours of beating both Needhog and Garyon. And then, like I said, even in DMD, once you take off their mask, they're dead. And before we move on onto Dante, here's a few fun or interesting moments with Nero and V, including how we quickly killed Urizen with Nero. I've never seen this move before. Damn. Oh, they can't get up here. They're stuck. Perfect. I'm like actually debating whether I should go take a fucking bathroom break while I'm waiting. They can't seem to get up here, so seems like I'm safe. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'll be fine. I'm back. What I miss? Oh, Nightmare's gone. They're both in their super DTs now.
I'm not interested in you having the win.
Oh! Okay. Oh, what? Actually, that's really good. Why not Tomboy? Because Tomboy requires us to use our shooting. Because I'm pretty sure Tomboy requires us to use our attack and shoot button to work, no? I can't use Griffin and Shadow Upperman. Did you not read the title of the stream? And finally, we reach our boy Dante. You probably already guessed that he is by far the easiest character out of 3. With his unique style system, Dante still has about half of his moves still available. We have Trickster to dodge, Swordmaster for melee combat, and Gunslinger, which is honestly absolutely busted in this game. And of course, Royal Guard, which is just... yeah. That being said, we still had to make some changes to make things a little bit easier. For starters, remove Barlog and Cerberus entirely. Now, you might think they're pretty strong, especially Barlog Swordmaster moves, and you would be right, but Swordmaster feels kind of like the glue, and without the base materials, you can't build something out of just glue, so they had to go. We also replaced Devil Sword Dante with Sparta instead, as Devil Sword Dante replaces most of the Swordmaster moves with these Summon Swords, which are really good normally, but just not that good by themselves. Regardless, the thing we spammed the most anyways, and our best form of damage, was Capitalism. Rather, Dr. Faust and its Red Hot Knight. This move is absolutely busted. And you know what? That's fair. Especially on a first playthrough, it charges super slow and costs a ton of red orbs. Just to put it in perspective, we started this challenge with 12 million orbs and ended it with less than 5 million. We spent over 7 million red orbs on just this one move for about 6 missions. With all of that being said, here's a little showcase on what the Dante gameplay looked like for this challenge. Die! Okay, now we just need to hit him once. There we go. And with Dante's missions finally done, we reached that 7-hour mission I mentioned earlier, which for those who've played the game might have already guessed it being Diverging Point V, in which you have to fight the previous bosses Goliath, Artemis, and Angelo without any healing or checkpoints. This mission was brutal. Most attacks will kill us on around 4 to 6 shots, and poor camera control, wacky hitboxes, and weird dodge mechanics did not help. We could not just brute force our way through this one, no. We had to be smart about this and figure out a strategy for each and every boss separately. For Artemis, we quickly figured out that we can parry her dash with a well-timed Devil Trigger activation. For Goliath, we basically had to play it like a weird Dark Souls boss, dodging his attacks and attacking with Arcane. Both certainly very challenging, but compare that to Angelo, oh man, at first we thought Shadow Step for infinite iframes, but the camera kept screwing our dodges and we thought that we had to pray until RNG works out, until after multiple hours we finally had one simple question. You think I can parry him with the cane? I don't even know if it's possible. you can. Yes, you can actually parry Angelo's attacks using V's cane. I cannot stress enough how difficult it was to not only learn to parry his attacks, but doing it consistently enough to have enough health for the other two bosses. But once we had enough practice, and then practicing both our Artemis parries and Goliath dodges, we finally, after 7 hours, ended up with this. Too brutal. Okay, I'm numb. This dimension, it's healing my body. This dimension, it's healing my body. This dimension, it's healing my body. Ah! Ah! Now, if that's not worth a like and a sub, I don't know what is. And with, in my opinion, the hardest part of this challenge out of the way, a quick break as we quickly kill Malphus and introduce Urizen and Nightmare to the power of capitalism. Back to, like, when I watch people play Devil May Cry 1, I have a hard time not to tell them how to play. And you know what? That's fine. I mean, some people do actually have, like, anti-backseat rules. I don't. I really don't mind people telling me how to play. Or I guess it depends. If it's, like, my first time playing, then I'll probably have, like, something for bosses, specifically. Ah, that doesn't work when she's in DT. Like, at all. There we go. Red Hot and I won't cut it in phase 3, it will. Please teleport. Nah, fuck. Ah, hit him. Okay, nice. We actually hit him. We got him. See? There you go. Easy peasy. Red Hot and I won't work, he said. You fool! Finally, with all of that out of the way, we reach near our end, and I'm not going to say much here. Vergil, as always, proves to be the most fun boss in gaming history, even for a challenge like this. I thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys later. Enjoy. Nice. fucking jeez. Stop with the summon swords. Stop with the fucking summon swords.